in a series that we're talking about the lost and forgotten, and new day for people lost and forgotten, and the focus is going to be on the outsider this morning. But there's an old song that, gosh, I don't know if I've lost Joe and Carol. Oh, hey, you can't leave yet. Yeah, before you go, listen to this song. Ready, Carol? Yeah, ready. Oh, there we go. All right. That's I think that was Ramsey Lewis, 19. Well, Mary can keep on going with this. This is right. I tell you, there's more to that song, and I was telling the early service, I was in the in crowd when I was your age, man. I was in crowd, and I just didn't even realize. I was so in, I didn't realize it. I was voted the president of my elementary school. I mean, I was in crowd. I was the basketball player of the year. When I was in 7th grade, I was I just was my crowd. I mean, the people, things happened. And just all came to me. People, and they swirled around me, and I was the in crowd. I didn't know what it was like not to be in the in crowd until I went to college and I started working with a high school group called Young Life. Young Life is great ministry, and their theory was if you could get to the in crowd, if you can get to the key kid of the in crowd, the key kids, then other people would follow, and so you reached out to those, and so they kind of separated the in from the out. It was kind of interesting. In our group, there were a lot of really sharp kids that were part of the group that I was leading, and yet there was one guy that stood out because he was isolated and he was definitely not in the in crowd. His name was Billy Gaskins. Billy was the kind of kid, when we go to the football games, back in those days, they would take confetti, and when something good happened, you throw confetti up in the air. And well, what we would do what the kids were doing, they would take their confetti, and when Billy Haskins would be sitting, and he was always sitting by himself, so they would take it and just throw it on him. They would just dump it on him. He would turn around, and then they would throw more on him. It was just a continual barrage. He was so far on the outside that it was like no one could identify with him, except it was interesting, those kids that I was working with, they adopted him. And he became a part of their things. He was a part of their group. And I was thinking, gosh, that seems to me to be what the ministry of Jesus is all about. Is for people on the inside to reach out to people on the outside and welcome them in. And just say, you're welcome. You're one of us. And I think that's right where the scriptures are too. So many places we read things like this. When an outsider resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you, that outsider, you must be treated as a native born. Love them as yourself, for you are foreigners in Egypt, and I'm the Lord your God. And when you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to it. It shall be for the sojourner, for the outsider, the fatherless, the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. And when you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over them again. It shall be for the sojourner, for that outsider, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterwards. It shall be for that outsider. You should make sure that the outsider, you should have eyes for the outsider. The thing is that when you're in the inside, sometimes you don't even recognize that there's anybody on the outside. And the outsider is somebody oftentimes that we want to push out the door. Now, Jesus in his own life and his own ministry, he was engaged in reaching the outsider. He saw himself in the lineage of outsiders. You look at Matthew chapter 1, and it says Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. And it's very important. In Jesus' lineage, it's emphasized that his mother was Ruth, and she was a Moabite. She was an outsider. And you know, it's kind of like you go and read the scriptures and you say, what do you do with this Moabitess? What do you do with this outsider? Because most of the times outsiders are meant to be on the outside. But in this understanding of Jesus' life and ministry, outsiders were supposed to be brought in. From Ruth comes Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. And so Jesus' lineage through David, but then through Ruth as well. Jesus, when he was born, of course, we have this horrible thing with Herod, who's killing off all the infants. And when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. The angel says, I want you to leave your homeland, the place where you're living, the place where you're a citizen. I want you to go to a place that by and large you would not think would welcome you. Go to Egypt, the very understanding of paradigm of evil oftentimes in the scriptures. But go to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Go to Egypt. You become an outsider. You and your family be an outsider. Find asylum in a land that probably isn't going to welcome you. That's what I want you to do. Go there to Egypt. And it says, so he got up, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, and where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. This is God's plan and purpose in the life of Jesus and his family. And it's right at the heart of who Jesus is. He is seeing himself and his family as being outsiders. If it wasn't for the outsiders or those that were not a part of his group taking care of him, there is no story of Jesus. But he found refuge in Egypt. Now, there's a whole history of Israel kind of living between two worlds. Because on the one hand, they lived in a world where Egypt, starting out, just did everything in the world to make life miserable for the people of Israel. They took them and they turned them into slaves, and they forced them to work and work harder, and there was this period where they would say Egypt is the absolute worst kingdom, nation, empire of them all. Then you come to many years later, the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians were noted for people who would skin you alive. That was one of the things they literally would do. And this empire destroyed the northern kingdom. And so you have the Assyrians. And after the Assyrians, you have the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire comes in and destroys Jerusalem. And so what we've got is people who are saying outsiders are evil, are wicked. They are going to harm us. Outsiders are people that you have to beware of. You look for outsiders because outsiders can destroy you. Outsiders can hurt you. So you always beware of outsiders. And that was sort of a mentality. So you have on the one hand this message of how can we reach out to outsiders. Then you have the message of outsiders are the most dangerous thing in the world. In Psalm 137 it says, remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. They wanted Jerusalem torn down. Daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. And this is what you did to our people. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks, just like you did to our infants. You are wicked and awful and evil, you outsiders. And so there's this real push in the scriptures to find purity. to find people who are just going to be inside. And so if you're married to somebody who's an outsider, you got to divorce them. If you're engaged in friendly relationships with people on the outside, you've got to stop that. You've got to figure a way to make sure that insiders are taken care of. Outsiders are to be expelled. Insiders cared for. So you have these two messages and two thoughts going on as you read the Old Testament. But you come to the ministry of Jesus, and we see that the worst empire that he is confronted, the Roman Empire, Jesus says, hey, got to embrace those people. The worst people in the world, people would say, would be those Roman soldiers. And Jesus is saying, hey, Roman soldiers, very people I want to embrace. It's kind of a different mentality. It doesn't make sense in many respects, and it didn't make sense to a lot of people of his day. But when Jesus, it says, finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum, and there a centurion's servant whom his master valued highly was sick and about to die. And the centurion is a Roman centurion. He is the guy that's causing all kinds of difficulties for the people of Israel. This is the people that most people would say we want to undermine. We want to slit their throats if we can. But Jesus has a different relationship to him. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, this man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation, has built our synagogue. So Jesus went with them, and he was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. And I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And it says that when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And returning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. I see in this Roman centurion, this Roman soldier, I see in the very people that are causing so much pain and hardship for all of us, I see the hand of God. I see God at work. I don't see you as the outsider to exclude. I see you as somebody to embrace and bring in. And the man who was sent returned to his house and found his servants well. Jesus has a peculiar way of dealing with people. He challenges us to the core of our being. He says that when we deal with people who are enemies, what we're supposed to do is pray for them, embrace them. He says anybody can be kind to the people who are nice to you. Anybody can be kind to the people who are in the in-group. It's the people who are able to extend themselves beyond their in-group. Those are the people that are entering into the kingdom of God. I want to broaden your perspective. I want to see bigger than the way you're seeing things right now. There are a lot of people who are fomenting rebellion against the Romans. But that wasn't where Jesus was coming from. He was coming from a different perspective. It's a spiritual revolution. And the very people that will one day put Jesus on the cross, Jesus says, I'm reaching out to in love and care and mercy and grace. It's a very strange perspective indeed. And yet there was one group that was even hated worse than the Romans. And Jesus used this group again and again as an example of outsiders who you're supposed to reach out to. Jesus reached out to the woman at the well and had to go through Samaria in order to do it. He chose to go through Samaria. Jesus healed all these 10 blind people. But what did he do? He wanted to make sure that the one who was a Samaritan and came back and thanked him, he wanted to acknowledge that for sure. Jesus was just into connecting with Samaritans, and even Samaritans that would reject him, he wanted to reach out and connect to. But he told a story about a Samaritan, the most hated group of his day, the outsider of outsiders as far as Jews were concerned. And Jesus said a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. And when he was attacked by robbers, They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. And a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when they saw the man, he passed by on the other side. Didn't want to get involved, didn't want to get connected to this guy who could have been, who knows, whatever he was going to be a problem for. But so same thing happened with the Levite who comes to the place and saw him and passes by on the other side. These religious leaders, these people who were part of the in-group, they were part of the in-group, but they didn't see this man as a part of the in-group. They saw him as someone to exclude, an outsider that they were supposed to exclude, somebody who's going to be a problem, and they wanted to exclude him. They want to make sure the problem stayed away from them. And then we have this Samaritan. As he travels, he came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him, and he went to him, and he bandaged his wounds, and pouring oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave him to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Remarkable story for anybody, but especially for the hated Samaritan as the hero of the story. What is Jesus saying? He's saying, I want you to look at Samaritans, people that you by and large despise. Who is it that you react to? You know, there's an interesting kind of a psychoanalysis that we can do. I was reading this book about shame, and it brought up the fact that think about the person that irritates you the most. You know, and they said, okay, here's a person that irritates me the most, and they say, more than likely, what's going on, the reason why they irritate you is that you see some quality in them that you recognize in yourself, but you don't want it anything to do with. So you hate it. It brings up something in you that you hate. So you think about the person you're hating, despising, don't want to be around, irritates the heck out of you. Probably it's something inside of you that you recognize and you don't want anything to do with. And the Samaritan says, I see in this person, I see a person who's an outsider, and my eyes are open to outsiders. And my care is to be extended to the outsider. The outsider is the person that I'm supposed to be reaching out to. That's the ministry of Jesus. That's the heart of Jesus. The Samaritan's the heart of Jesus. Then we have in First Peter, we have this passage in 1 Peter 2. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering a spiritual sacrifice acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Too often what we do in church is we build a fort and we say, I built this theological fort, I built this spiritual fort, and what we do, we want to keep everyone else outside of it. We want just people like us in the fort. And every now and then we go outside the fort and we try to do some good outside, and we come back into the fort and we try to drag somebody into the fort with us. But that picture, I think, is such a damning picture of what we're called to do and be. I think what we're supposed to be is an embracing community. Somehow outsiders are just, hey, you're an outsider. Guess what? I'm an outsider. As an outsider, you're welcomed in. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are a people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as outsiders and as exiles and as people others have rejected and as people who would maybe want to find the shortcut to the way you can deal with life by fulfilling your sinful desires. Maybe you feel like I have a right to be able to to go the low route because life has been so tough for me and others have hurt me so much. I can take the low route. And Jesus is saying, or Peter is saying here, you are called to a higher standard because you understand that you're an exile for Jesus. You're a foreigner for Jesus. You're an outcast. You're a outsider for Jesus. And then live such a good life among the pagans, among those who are outsiders, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. How can we see through eyes that enable us to see outsiders all around us and love on those people who are unlovely to us? How does that happen? That seems to be the model, but it's a difficult model. It's much, 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 much easier to love the people who are like us and with us and alongside of us. I was an insider for a long, long time. I was in the in-group for a long time, in every way, shape, and size, all the way through high school and college, and then seminary, and then in churches. And I was pastoring. I was an insider until I went through a divorce, and for some reason at that time it just spoiled my track record. Everything, it might spoil my whole understanding of who I was as a person, because I was a person that didn't have those kind of things. I was an insider always on the inside. I was the insider's insider. I was right there. And they told me that you're no longer welcome on the inside. You're no longer part of the group. You're no longer to be a pastor of this church. You're no longer to be the husband of this wife. You're no longer to be the father who raises the children. You're no longer to be living in the house that you lived in. I lived in somebody else's house on the couch for a month. You are no longer the pastor. I worked at a grocery store for several months. That was disaster, I can admit. That was really, I'm the world's worst. Don't hire me. If I come along and say, hire me as to run a cash register, say, no, forget it. You're bad. I was a bad cash register person. I was a guy that would forget to put the meat in the bags when the lady would go, and I'd chit-chat with her, and she'd come on, hey, that guy forgot to put the meat in my bag. That was me. I was a guy who was supposed to close up and lock up at night. I would say, did I lock the safe? Or I was a guy that left the safe unlocked, and would come back and find it was all, it was, anyways, it was, they even fired me from that job. I just said, fired, you're out of here, you're fired. This is, the only place they welcomed me was at a residential treatment center for at-risk youth. And I found a home among outsiders. These were kids that were not in the in-group. They were all outsiders. None of them were in the in-group. They were all outsiders. And I found a home. I felt right at home. I felt at home. A lot of times we isolate people because they have the wrong theology, the wrong politics, the wrong bank account, the wrong background. But if you're an outsider and you see yourself as an outsider, everybody is kind of welcome in. And these young people became, I did with them kind of like I do with you all. I told current stories. I remember telling them this one story about how I was watching a basketball game with my 11, 12-year-old son playing basketball, and his mother and his stepfather were also there, and they were upset with me, They didn't feel that the payments were right or whatever. I said I'd turn that over to somebody else, so I just didn't want to talk to them about it. I said, I'm just letting this person that's doing this for me to handle it. I just don't want to. I'm watching the game. And stepfather came to me. I was sitting in the back row, and he grabbed me by my neck and threw me up against the wall. And it would have taken nothing for him to have killed me right there. And I told these kids this story, and afterwards I had a few of them come up to me and say, "We know some people that can handle that guy. Take care of it." But they were right there with me. Those kids were right there with, because they knew that story. That they could tell that story. They could tell that same kind of story, because I had kids that could say, I don't have a dad because some guys came over to the house one time and they took a gun out, shot my dad right in front of me. I mean, the stories that they could tell. So I could not begin to match the stories, but they were stories of outsiders. There were stories of people who had been on the outside, and I really believe that what the gospel is supposed to be is a place where outsiders can gather in the midst of that gospel. And it comes from all shapes or sizes. You don't have to have all your ducks in a row and anything else other than that you're an outsider. We're outsiders together. We're people who have been rejected, outcast, pushed aside, overlooked, rejected. We're people who are ready for a new day. Because Jesus says, those are my kind of people. I just am amazed as I go around and just think about what's going on here. Carol, as you prayed that beautiful prayer, you're right. We all need healing in different ways, don't we? We all need healing in different ways. That's one of the things I say is a common denominator. Why do I think some people may or may not fit at Harbor Point? It's people who don't think that they need any healing. If you don't think that, this is not a good place for you. It's a good place if you think that there's some areas that need to be healed. And it's a good place if you feel like you're an outsider in many places. We want this to be a place where Jesus is present and can make a difference in your life. Fred, I'm going to ask you to be over by that cross. Fred is a real man of God. By the way, there's a Bible study that we'll have tomorrow on the Sermon on the Mount. First couple lessons have been really exceptional. Dave led us in a study on the Beatitudes. We're looking at salt and light tomorrow. It's going to be a great study. Fred's going to lead us in that. But Fred knows how to pray. He will pray with you. So if you need prayer right now, he's a person to turn to. But Lord, I just want to say thank you for this time that we can spend together. And for those of us that are in need of just a special healing touch, I pray that today is one of those days. I pray that there's going to be healing. I pray that we're going to latch on to those messages that you want us to be near our soul. But I know one of them is that you love us more than we can possibly imagine, that the cross covers all of our sins, that we enter into a relationship with you by faith, and we want to give our minds and bodies and souls and spirits over to you, but we don't want to be cookie cut. We want to do this our own way, because that's the only way we can come to you. We got to come to you ourselves, as ourselves. And we just want to be open, really eyes wide open to others around us who are outsiders, and to welcome them in. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.